Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of Technologists in Bars talking AV. This time, my guest is Paul Chavez. Paul works at Arup Consulting, and if you don't know Arup, you'll get to know them a little bit more. When I asked Paul where he'd want to meet, he mentioned this brewery, Phantom Carriage. And Phantom Carriage is an amazing place with all sorts of unique brews, including some sours, which are Paul's favorite. You'll learn a little bit more about that. You'll see their horror movie theme. You'll learn about what Arup does. And we'll talk a little bit about our crazy AV world. Sit back, have a drink, and join us in Technologists in Bars talking AV. Hey everybody, Mark Coxon with Technologists in Bars talking AV. We are back. After a small hiatus with job changes and things, I had to get back on the road. And today I grabbed Paul Chavez from Arup Consulting. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
You doing awesome?
Thanks for having me.
This is a really cool place. And when I reached out to you, I asked if you knew any place nice, because I've done Left Coast, I've done Gamecraft.
Yeah.
I did one in Georgia at Good Word Brewing.
Oh, that's cool.
And we did one at Barley Forge.
Yeah,
but we haven't done one kind of in LA, and you knew a great little spot here in LA to do a podcast.
I found this place because they seem to specialize in sours, and came down here and kind of really liked the feel of it. And so I'm happy to meet you here.
I thank you for joining me. I don't know if very many people know Paul. I met Paul when you were at Harman.
Yep.
What got you into AV? Where did you come from originally that you got into the AV industry?
Well, music. I mean, I studied music in college, but it was always with a technology band. I was always fiddling with pedals and guitars, and recording became a real love. Recording and the acoustics related to recording. So when I got into college, I went to see how can I become a studio builder and learn how to do that. And after a couple of twists and turns there, I ended up in kind of acoustics and sound system design.
Wow.
Doing a lot of performing arts. And that sort of led into general AV consulting in the late 90s. Joined Harman and did more product design. At the end of sort of that AV consulting period, I got really obsessed with why it was so hard to get people to use our systems. They were having lots of troubles, and we realized, I think somehow through dialogue, that touch panels that we were designing, we really didn't know how to do it. And so I really delved into user-centered design, and at the time it was just usability, right? Uh-huh. And there was very little writing about it. It was the mid-90s, and the digital design world was evolving at that time, and so more material started to become available. I started teaching user interface design at Infocom.
Wow.
And it evolved, and then when I went to Harman, I kind of ended up eventually getting into more user-centered design and sort of leading a design group. And we were designing everything from portable PA experiences and systems to larger things that they're continuing on with now.
Wow.
So yeah, it was
awesome.
Pretty exciting because it was the first time this professional organization had really started to adopt real user-centered design and high level, high quality graphic design and these sorts of things that is where we're going.
They matter, right?
Yeah, they matter. Especially now they matter because the whole digital design industry has really kind of raised the bar, and there's a lot more people that are learning about it. There are curriculums in college now for user-centered design and just design in general. Places like the Stanford Design School has really just been a leader in this, and so it's really happening now. And so when Harman sort of reorged and they asked me to move, and I really didn't want to move away from LA because I love LA.
Yeah.
So I looked around, and I had been doing some really interesting work with Arup in collaboration, and went over and asked if they would be interested in exploring more user-centered design in the built environment.
Yeah.
And I was really happy, thrilled that they were into looking at what this means. So that's what I'm doing at Arup now. Is my title is sort of the experience designer, and we're exploring a lot of ways of consolidating acoustics and lighting and audiovisual design and and comfort design and all of the things that make for an environment for any number of applications.
So I was designing systems for senior citizens
Yeah.
to have high-end AV systems because they loved music, they loved movies, they weren't afraid to spend money, they liked nice things.
Right.
But it had to work in a way that they understood it. And I honestly, like in retrospect, I honestly think doing that day in and day out really got me in a place where I started to think about like how people saw things, what they called things, what was easy for them to see and intuitive.
Yeah, you had a customer that really had low tolerance for complexity or learning new things, and so you had to really speak their language, right? You had to create a system that fit within their knowledge base.
Yeah, do you feel like people, like coming from the consultant side, when you're working with end users and you're seeing, what's delivered out in the marketplace from other integration firms and things, do you think that more and more integration firms are embracing that side of the business, or do you think that they're leaning on the consultant or the customer to provide kind of those parameters and then they just deliver it to it?
Gosh, it's a really good question. I do believe that the whole industry has raised their level of awareness and actually it's even easier than that. I think that the whole industry has normalized. There's a lot fewer kind of use models or design models today than there were in the 90s. Like, people were doing crazy things. Today they're doing very iPhone related things and using a lot of conventional means. So the palette of tools is kind of narrowed down. You've got iOS and you've got Android, material patterns to use, and a lot of people are using those. So I think that the industry people are doing a lot. Now, from an owner point of view, what I'm hoping is that on that side of the equation, they get a lot more used to taking a maintenance model on these software things that they're being delivered. This is something I really fight against in the built environment, is that there's a culture of finishing and handing over like a finished product, very much in contrast with the digital world today, where you get updates every 6 months.
Yeah.
And we can't deliver a building that doesn't get updated any 6 months anymore, except that the owners still don't really have that model. So I'm hoping they're kind of getting used to it, and they're starting to pay for more sort of software as a services in various places. And so the ability to the need to do that on the AV side and the systems management side and all of that is starting to kind of get some awareness and adoption, I think.
Well, that's good. That's encouraging because I think.
Do you see it? Are you seeing it?
I see glimpses of it. I think. I hear a lot of people say they understand that it's important, but I think that we are so conditioned as an industry to be late in the construction cycle that we get very limited access to users. We get a spreadsheet with parts. We get a reflected ceiling plan and a space plan, and they say go, and we want business, so we go. And we have never actually thought about the way the system's going to be used, implemented. We've never met one person that's going to use it. We do our best to guess at some touch paddle iterations that we send to somebody and they say, okay, I guess looks good enough to me.
One person usually.
Because the IT department looks at it and says, I can understand it. And then we wonder, like later, why we continually get put to bid or why our systems aren't adopted highly or those things. And so I just wondered, because I know from my end, I see glimpses, but I see less and less firms, not less and less. I don't see a lot of people investing in resources like a behavioral analyst.
Does the user have as tools to leverage, and what are the sort of cultural conventions of this? I totally agree that my biggest problem with voice, even in my home, is if I played with it. I always sort of pilot different things in my house, and my wife in the next room saying, "What did you say?" It's like I'm talking to Alexa.
Yeah,
it doesn't work, right?
Yes.
In many respects, it doesn't work. It may work in specific applications, right? And what I teach sometimes is that I think it's something Don Norman said, is that we need to build technologies that serve our human needs and our human capabilities. And so what I teach is what is the natural thing to be doing at that at the point at which you need to interact. And you have a lot of means to do it now. You have voice, and you have gesture, and you have touch screens, and you have many things. And so just presence sensing. So just use whatever's appropriate. The AV industry has a problem with that right now because there isn't a really great toolkit to sort of piece together all of that.
Yeah.
But I think eventually, what I get involved with more are probably the exceptions than the sort of routine things.
Yeah.
So, and that's back to your other question about where do we see it happening? Well, it's not really happening on a day-to-day basis. Some of this higher-end user-centered design, user-centered research, multimodal interaction, but there are some clients that want it and need it and can pay for it.
That's the other piece, right?
And actually, that is a big piece at Harman. When I was there, it took us a while to get used to the cost structure of doing good design. I mean, it's a lot more expensive, but the ROI on it should be obvious. Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, coming from the museum space, we did a lot of, number one, we had to be very universal in our interfaces because we have everyone from, you may have foreign nationals that don't understand the language.
Yeah.
You might have multi-language support, maybe you don't, but you want things to still be not intuitive. You want things to be discoverable, to use a Don Norman term, right? You want things to be discoverable even with somebody without familiarity or experience. So that discoverability needs to be high.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that we noticed, in that space was, lost my train of thought for a second, with the museum side.
Trying to generalize the interfaces into...
just trying to generalize them and make them I guess, accessible to everybody that walk through the space.
These public implementations and where you have a lot of people through, whether it's a train station or a hospital or a museum. I mean, there are all these really hard problems to solve because of just the wide range of users. Absolutely.
And I got my other train of thought.
Oh, good.
Choo-choo coming through through the station. The other thing I was going to say is that what was interesting to me coming into that market is that the content does not exist. So if you are the Field Museum and you have Iroquois arrowheads and you want to tell the story about who discovered these, where they came from, how they got to the place that they're at, how long they've been in the basement before they came up to be on exhibit, whatever that story is, that's all custom. And so you're talking about the cost of the user interface.
Absolutely.
Many times if we did $1 million AV implementation, there was $1 million in content.
I totally agree.
Production and filming and graphics and CG animation and all those things.
And then 3 years later, there's another $1 million in content, ideally, right? I mean, it's a rotation. I think that content and storytelling is a piece that the AV industry is getting kind of familiar with now. I think it's one of the, I like to break down experiences into that storytelling element because not all spaces have a storytelling element. And then there's the interaction element, which is something we've done a lot of in the AV industry. And then there's the ambient element, which we don't always own. The acoustics, the lighting, the finishes and furniture and all that. That's what you get when you walk into a room. It's those three elements. If you take them apart and you sort of take responsibility for all of them, now you're creating a full integrated experience.
There you go. There you go. Integrated experience. So this one's called Mouse. We're kind of sharing. I'm just going to tell everybody. So Mouse, and this is more of like a Belgian blonde kind of.
It's kind of some kind of a saison of their making, and it has that kind of saison flavor with a little bit of funkiness.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And this is called Daughters of Darkness because we're at Phantom Carriage.
Exactly.
And it's a blackberry Belgian double. So it's. And while we were on break here, food came. Now people ask me not to completely eat the whole time I'm talking, so I won't. But this is fries for cowboys.
Oh right, yeah, absolutely.
Got to come over for Avixa's cohort lab, and when we did that on cohort, you have a very interesting room, and I think we were kind of some of the first people to hear the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fairly new. Yeah, it's called the Sound Lab, and it's actually a bit of a standard. We keep kind of improving it every time we do them, but it's a bit of a standard that we have in multiple offices throughout the world, actually. And it's a room where we can basically play back ambisonic audio files, which we develop for a number of different things, a pretty wide variety of things. So our room is slightly different from the other rooms. It's got a few more speakers. I think it's 24 speakers.
Wow.
They're embedded into the wall, so they're not as visible as in some of the sound labs where where they're actually in a spherical configuration. Ours are pushed into the walls so that it's a little more subtle and magical. And our walls are white, so we're moving towards doing more projection, more kind of cave-like experiences, because it's not just about audio, but our audio, the sound labs throughout the world, they can do things like what they do best is variations on acoustical options. So anything from a concert hall where you're moving walls around or moving reflectors around or changing the volume of a concert hall, to just trains passing by a building where you're comparing one kind of window to another kind of window, and we can put in the parameters of those windows and say, this is what you get if you pay enough money, and this is what you get if you don't invest. And
yeah.
That's the whole point of the thing, is that it may not be a perfect representation of what's going to happen, but it's a good enough variation that the architect can finally make a real decision. The architect and the owner, they can finally make a decision based on actual something related to what they're paying for, which is what's it going to sound like.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's really no way. They're sort of taking your word for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
We talked about a lot of things, for sure. You have a very diverse background. You're working for an awesome, innovative company. If you could handpick like a project to come across the table to you, so like your dream project, you're thinking like if anything could come across that table at Arup, like whether it was public venue had something to do with music and your passion, whether it had something to do with something you've seen in the past that you really had a lot of experience with, that you loved, what would that project be that comes across the table to you?
So
what ignites your passion when you get a new project?
I'll tell you right now, it might change over one day versus another, but I've been thinking a lot about public spaces and how do you make an airport, and so it's not necessarily like specific to an application, but how do you make an airport? Well, and actually maybe airport is the best example, because airports are places where a lot of people come together, and there's all these really incredible and talented, intelligent people that are in airports, and yet their instinct is to stay to themselves and to shut out all of these incredible people around here. If I could leverage technology to encourage people to interact in a space like that somehow.
Wow.
I really don't know the answer to the question. It's just this question that I'm really keeping my eye out for opportunities to see when technology or when design helps people to interact, because it comes back to stories in the historical the history of cities where technology and the Industrial Revolution and all of these incredible innovations happened because of the development of the city, and the development of the city enabled people to communicate. And even Stephen Johnson, an author, writes really eloquently about this and where good ideas come from.
Okay.
Where when they finally got to have good water in places, and they didn't have to drink beer in the morning because this was safe.
Wow.
In the morning.
Yeah.
Or they could drink coffee. They were sitting in cafes and drinking coffee, lighting up their brains with caffeine and talking, and then all this incredible development happened. All of these inventions happened during that time, and like these airports are just a cauldron of potential inventions and potential interaction.
100%.
I want to get people talking.
That's very interesting. I would say, as somebody who traveled a lot, especially and you traveled a lot for Harman, as somebody who traveled a lot, I took a lot of cues from the people around me. Like I'm social by nature and curious by nature. So I've wanted it. If I sat in a row of people, I would want to know what every single one of those people did.
Totally agree with you.
But if somebody has their headphones in, or if somebody's looking down, or somebody's avoiding eye contact, or somebody puts their bag down and closes
you
their
get the
eyes.
signs.
Yeah, I'm emotionally intelligent enough not to strike up a conversation and ruin the mode that they're in, because they're in a mode. But sometimes I feel like, if other people were looking, do they know that I am in discovery mode?
Right.
That I am open to discovery, right?
Yeah, and this is a key, right?
Right.
A little bit of a key. Like, how can you outwardly, like, give a signal, a signifier that I'm open?
So this leads me back to something very interesting, and maybe this works or maybe this doesn't.
Okay.
With networking, what they used to do, what he used to do, was anytime he got somebody's business card, he called this the back of the business card, is what he called it.
Okay, yeah.
So anytime he got somebody's business card, what he would do is he'd look at their business card, he'd flip it over, and he'd say, what are you passionate about?
It's cool.
And whatever they were passionate about, he would write on the back of the business card. And then what he did is anytime he made connections between people, so let's say, you love music, and I meet somebody else who knows music, and I know there's a business reason between Arup and their company to do business.
Yeah.
I don't introduce you on that.
Okay.
I say, you know what? I know another guy who plays classical, Spanish guitar. We should all have lunch together because you guys would have a ton to talk about. So we introduce you guys based on Spanish guitar.
Great.
You talk, you form a relationship. At some point in that conversation, you go, what do you do?
Yeah.
And they go, I do this. And you go, holy crap, we work with people that do that all the time. And then all of a sudden, now you have the real connection. So you have both. And I just thought it was a genius way to try
it's these exact reasons, these little ideas that get shared, that get dissipated. This is why people need to interact. And thanks for having me in this conversation today. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate you joining us. This is Technologists in Bars talking AV from Phantom Carriage in Gardena, California. And we will see you guys next time.
Cheers.